Jen Hidinger-Kendrick. Welcome to the Relevate Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, it is so great to finally meet you. I have heard just amazing things about what you're doing and really, really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me and to share your story.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And I will say it definitely takes a team and community effort. So I'm happy to talk about it. Happy to have that chance.
Okay. Awesome. So how do you describe yourself?
Myself personally?
Yeah.
Oh, full of energy. I am one of those people that doesn't require a ton of sleep.
Mm.
My husband says I'm like the Energizer Bunny when I roll out of bed. So really energetic. I'm really positive, pretty introspective. And I would say I really appreciate when people think I'm kind.
That's a great compliment. And did I read that you worked for an ad agency for a little bit?
Yeah, I did. My late husband and I actually are both from Indianapolis, Indiana. And when we moved to Atlanta in late 2004, I ended up getting a job with my brother-in-law at the time. He worked at an ad agency and helped me get my foot in the door because it was right after college. I had just graduated from college. But yeah, that was my first kind of step in my professional career. The original career, if you will, was at an ad agency here in Atlanta.
Yeah, same here. Same here. I learned a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
I learned a lot. Yeah, so much. Okay, so let's talk about Ryan, your first love. If you can just share more about him.
Yeah, so we met back home in Indianapolis, Indiana. I was actually a senior in high school. He was a 22-year-old chef working nearby at a catering company. And I was working at a grocery store, a local community grocery store, as a cashier and an office manager at the time. And he lived across the street, and he came in and we met. He would buy packs of bubble gum just to walk through the cashier line just to say hi and have a few, exchange a few words. The sweetness of the year 2000, 20 years ago. That's crazy. And so it was just kind of love at first sight for me, is actually the way I always tell that story. He always would say it took him a little bit longer. But it was, for me, it was a pretty immediate connection. I remember, we exchanged pleasantries and then just got to learn about each other at a young age, and just really developed a really beautiful and strong foundation early on, and dated all through college. And, right after I graduated from college is when he proposed, and then we moved to Atlanta and got married a year later.
Nice. So his heart was always in the food industry.
It was, yes. So he being from Indianapolis, a small kind of town, he decided instead of a 4-year college degree that he wanted to do something tactile and work with his hands and do something in the trade. And so he ended up going to culinary school and came here to Atlanta, actually, for culinary school back in 97, 98, and was here for a couple of years. And it's so interesting because back then, he had always said, for years later, that he felt like Atlanta defeated him, like quote unquote. And I always found that so fascinating when you look at, Atlanta then, from it being this, not necessarily this big cultural hub for food and beverage, where it is, today in like the last maybe 8 to 10 years. But he really felt back then that Atlanta was just too big, and he wanted to go back home and kind of repurpose home at that point. So he did. And then we met, and we ended up moving back to Atlanta in 2004 after a long cross-country road trip around the United States, and had no idea where we wanted to live, but decided that, along that journey that we would just find our place. And it ended up being that we were in Corpus Christi, Texas, when a hurricane hit where his dad and stepmom lived in Florida. So it kind of stopped our road trip a little bit early. I ended up flying to Atlanta because it was one of the closest cities nearby. We had planned to stop through there anyway, and we had some family living there at the time. And then after he helped his dad and stepmom out of kind of that wreckage, he drove to Atlanta, and we were like, okay, we'll stay here maybe 6 months, a year. We'll just figure it out, and have never left.
So I love how the whole supper house idea started at your house. Share more about that because that is so
Yeah, the beautiful, fond memories. I love it so much. So, Ryan had been working in the culinary community here in Atlanta for some time. Again, we starting in about 2004, late 2004, and he actually started working on the line at Bacchanalia, which is one of kind of Atlanta's premier, tasting menu. Chef Enquintrano, just a beautiful, wonderful mentor businesswoman, has been here for a very long time. She's a staple in our town, if not in absolutely in the Southeast region. And he knew that if we were going to stay in Atlanta, he had to work for the best chef here. And so that's when he had the opportunity to work at Bacchanalia. He, about a year and a half or so later, she promoted him to sous chef at a sister restaurant. And so he moved over there. And a little bit after that, he decided to kind of just try a new path here in Atlanta, and ended up moving to what was then a sandwich shop in Smyrna, Georgia, called Muss & Turner's, where we ended up meeting extremely close friends, like brothers, and some business mentors, his bosses at the time, where he ended up staying for about 8 years. And it was during the Muss & Turner's time that we decided, along that journey, that there was Atlanta obviously had some really great opportunity that was kind of untapped, we thought. And we knew that if we were going to really settle in and build our roots here, that we really needed to engage with the community. And that was really our deciding factor for wanting to create Prelude to Staple House, which ended up being a supper club that we hosted out of our home. We knew for us, it was really a beautiful grassroots style kind of effort to get to learn the people within our city and our community and offer them our type of hospitality, which was a very Midwestern style, but now, with kind of a Southern, flair. And to be able to showcase Ryan's talent and passion with food, his style of finesse, his approach to, textures and flavors. And with me, it was really just more of, I was an incredibly supportive wife. I loved watching him create and be in the kitchen. And so for me at the beginning, it was more of just being the supportive wife and host, always the entertainer. I always, again, going back to the energy roots, loved a party. So that's kind of the impetus for starting Prelude to Staple House. And it was about a year in that we realized we could do this, and we wanted to do this as a business, and we wanted to go into it and partner together, and create what was hopefully going to be one day a restaurant called Staple House.
So how many people would you have in your house at any given time?
I actually still have the original dining room table that we sat everybody around, but we have kind of an open, it's a small house, a small home, but it's all open. 6 at the dining room table and 4 at our little breakfast bar that was open to the kitchen. So we could have 10 and Ryan would be inside the kitchen and facing everybody. So it was a really kind of open style format.
I just love that. So from there, the idea of Staple House came about, and then y'all started percolating that idea. And tell me what happened, Jen.
We did. So in 2010 is when we decided that we could really kind of do this for ourselves, and we could start that traction and that momentum of putting together a business plan. We ended up hiring a business consultant. We ended up hiring, a real estate agent, and we really just kind of hit the ground running and started to put together those resources to go to banks and go to investors and guarantors, et cetera. And it was, right after the recession hit. So we were, trying to build a business at the time where the economy was, very poor, but we never lost sight of that dream, if you will. And so we continued with Prelude to Staple House almost every weekend. It was pretty much any free time we had. He had a full-time job at the restaurant. I was in advertising and had working some retail. So both had full-time jobs. And we would send out, I remember we would send out a menu via email to like less than 200 people. And we would say, hey, who wants to come? You have to eat with strangers, but here's the menu. If you're interested, email back. We'll save you a spot. There's only 10. We're asking for a donation. It's a 5-course meal. We'll pair wines. It was a really kind of novel concept for Atlanta. It was not a novel concept for places like Seattle or LA or New York, who had been doing kind of these underground style format dinners for some time. But for Atlanta, no one was doing it. and so that's really, we led with that. We led with that type of community and hospitality. And we did that for quite a long time. It was up until December of 2012. But we would host dinners and a couple of large parties, and just knew that at one point this idea for a restaurant could come to fruition. It just took a really, really long time. It was a few years before he was diagnosed.
And his health was good up until that point?
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, literally never missed a day of work in his life for a cold, like just perfect health. I mean, just never sick. And it was for most people, we talk about that a lot, what crisis is like. And it was 100% crisis in a very unexpected time. I had given him a ticket to New York. He had never been, as a chef, kind of sacrilegious to have never been to New York. And at that point, I had given him a ticket to New York to be there for 12 hours, just to go to like a few places and eat. And he ended up going with my now brother-in-law. And they ended up going for about 12 hours, really enjoyed themselves. And he came back, and the very next morning, he ended up having some flu-like symptoms, which persisted for some days. And it got to the point where he missed several days of work, which was incredibly abnormal. So we sent him in to get an ultrasound, which led to an MRI. And later that afternoon, on December 12th of 2012, was when we realized he had a terminal cancer diagnosis of 6 months with stage 4 gallbladder cancer.
Cannot imagine getting that news. Because how old were you at that time? Like 21?
My God, how old was I? 30, not even 29. Yeah, 29, almost 30. I think he died when I was 30. Yeah. And he was 35.
Wow. So when did you start to discover your strength in all of this?
I love that question, because that's actually a question I kind of, in a roundabout way, tend to ask people when I am kind of in a similar situation. I always ask about their kind of life defining moment, what happened in their lives to change the trajectory. And for me, there's a couple moments. Something happened, kind of a first life lesson for me when I was young, a toddler. But even again, kind of another kind of a repurpose, a redefining moment was after he passed. And I had the ability, he was given a 6-month terminal cancer diagnosis. And I remember my mom asking in those first few days, like, well, what is the doctor saying? And his family asking, well, what are the doctors saying? And me having to kind of say, I wanted to protect everybody, including myself, but having to say, these are the words that, a doctor is saying to us, is that he has 6 months. And to try to comprehend that is unfathomable. But Ryan had a really beautiful perspective on life. He really approached it with awe and honesty. And he even had said, at the fundraiser that ended up being put on for us to aid in our benefit, he stood up on stage in front of 1,000 people and said, "This is just a part of my journey." And so we led with that last year, that his purpose was meant to just kind of be a beacon of hope for other people. And he really led that way. He was a spiritual person, not super religious, but just really allowed that type of selflessness, to prevail for others. So the others, including myself, his best friends and family, weren't afraid.
My gosh. Cannot imagine. And what a leader. I mean, I keep reading about the quotes and the leadership, and he was just such a natural born leader too.
He really was. He was a really beautiful leader. Really, I always say, he was a good old Indiana boy at his roots, just a really modest and humble individual, really funny, but a really good leader.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Atlanta restaurant community coming together to support you and what that looked like. Because I mean, I just, it really makes me proud of my town and the food service community. So talk a little bit about what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, I love having kind of that sense of pride for our community. And, community, especially right now with what we're facing in the world, is, can be a small community, can be your neighbors, or it can be, a larger community like your city or, your town or extended. And it's pretty awesome. And for us, that's really what happened, is that, he was diagnosed, and we gave this information to his bosses and obviously all of our friends and family. And it was 3 specific individuals who ended up coming to us It was his bosses at the time and who are dear friends and like brothers to me today. Chris Hall, Todd Mussman, and Ryan Turner of Muss and Turner's and multiple restaurants now. And they called us up and came over to the house one day and said, we want to help you. And it was at that moment, you know, we, as a young couple, never wanting help, never seeking help, something I talk about a lot. And we, at that moment, we really had no other choice. We really had to kind of just let that, you know, that armor down and just say, yes, do whatever you need to do. And for them, it was a matter of they wanted to make sure that their dear friend had no financial burden through, you know, his year of cancer, and whatever means possible, there would be no, you know, roadblocks to get anything that we needed medically. Ryan was fully covered under insurance, but ultimately, you know, there's an incredible amount of expense when things, you know, like that can hit you. And so that's really what happened, is that they helped with a committee of people, dear friends and family, put on a benefit, a fundraiser that we aptly named Team Heidi, Heidi being short for our last name of Hidinger. And it happened in 3.5 weeks time. I mean, from the date of his cancer diagnosis to the time that the fundraiser was put on was less than 4 weeks, which is like unheard of, because the type of gathering that happens usually takes a year to plan.
Totally.
So it was literally less, it was about 850 people showed up, 40 restaurants and bars. There was a live auction of like 13 to 15 live auction lots. And
amazing
raising. Yeah, right. It ended up raising just shy of $300,000 for us. And that was really kind of what ignited the spark and idea for the Giving Kitchen.
Wow. So what did that conversation look like after that event when Giving Kitchen was born?
Yeah, so his boss, one of them, Ryan Turner, namely, came over and to our house after that benefit and sat us down and just kind of had a heart to heart. He had a dream that I think woke him up late at night, and he had just kind of this clear vision of, you know, what does it mean to be medicine? And I remember he came over that afternoon, that day, and it was just a few days after Team Heidi, and had told us about this. And he said, what if Staple House could be your form of medicine, another form of medicine for this time? But also, what if this restaurant that you've been wanting and working so tirelessly on for years to open, what if it became a restaurant of purpose instead of just this traditional restaurant? And that was really the idea of, what if we gave back to our community from a nonprofit perspective to help other food service workers in their time of crisis. So whether it was a medical diagnosis like cancer, which happens all the time, or if it was another, you know, illness or an injury or a housing disaster like a flood or fire, or the death of an immediate family member, there can be an organization that's out there to help support those food service workers in their time of need in the same way that we were helped. So that's really how it happened, is we said, yes, we have to do that.
What an idea. What an idea.
That's what we have to do. That was our mission.
Wow. And to have those 3 balls in the air of loving and caring for your husband with terminal cancer, and then developing a restaurant and a nonprofit at the same time. It's like, wow.
Yeah, there was a lot going on, but I think, you know, for us, it was a true form of medicine. I ended up leaving my full-time job to be his full-time caregiver, which was necessary. And then to also act as kind of a pseudo executive director for those first 12 months, along with a few other founding members as well. And really took that year to, you know, to realize what was important for us and our family and friends, and just to try to work on something that felt good about giving back.
Yeah. So awesome. So the restaurant, Staple House, you had family support to get it open after Ryan's passing. Is that correct?
We did. We absolutely did. So right after he was diagnosed, actually, we ended up forming, we kind of opened up our business partnership beyond just him and I, and ended up teaming up with Ryan's younger sister and her husband, Ryan Smith. So it ended up being 2 Ryans, a Kara and a Jen, who formed this partnership to open up the restaurant. And then you progress. He did pass in January of 2014. And we, as the threesome, then moved that forward and carried it forward to open up the restaurant in September of 2015, which ended up being 2 years after the inception and birth of Giving Kitchen, which was already at that point kind of a functioning and established nonprofit, which is pretty spectacular.
Good. So I guess it wasn't true just for you that you were using purpose to move your grief into action. You were surrounded by family members who were also working to make the dream happen of Staple House.
Absolutely. You know, Ryan and his family were really, really close. And especially he and his siblings, Kara, his younger sister, and his older brother, Scott. And Kara and her husband, Ryan, have been in the food service industry since they were teenagers. So it was, yes, to have that family support, but it really became their restaurant too. It wasn't just ours and them fulfilling, this help. This became, this core unit of, and having, a really big purpose and mission to not only have a restaurant and to see, Ryan's legacy, part of his legacy come to fruition, but we also really had deep intentions to make it one of the best restaurants in the country. It was bigger than kind of all of us at that point. And then, for me, it was always carrying the passion and the commitment to having a voice for our nonprofit, because what was born out of this tragedy was something so beautiful. So for me, it was always looking to that bigger picture of how do we project the work that the nonprofit is doing through Staple House and beyond it.
Very cool. Very cool. So I've never eaten at Staple House. It has been on my list for years. So I can't wait to be there. But now, since we're in this whole COVID-19 quarantine thing, the restaurant has retooled and doing something so cool. If you can share a little bit more about that, and then I really want to dive deep into Giving Kitchen.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. So Staple House is doing something really spectacular. They, I will say, I made a bit of a transition late last year after being with my partners in the restaurant for 4.5 years. And I ended up kind of releasing my portion of partnership to them to allow them the opportunity to really take it. And I ended up coming over to the staff of Giving Kitchen full-time last November. So when all of this happened, which obviously was just recently, a month ago, Ryan and Kara decided, again, my former business partners decided that instead of Staple House turning into, still a full service restaurant and doing takeout and whatnot, they decided that they wanted to kind of reinvigorate that momentum of pay it forward mentality. So they ended up turning Staple House into Staple House Soup Kitchen, where they are free of charge giving away meals to hospitality food service industry members who've been affected by COVID-19. And they're giving away anywhere from 50 to 100 meals 7 days a week to anybody who comes and needs it. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And they're beautiful Staple House meals, aren't they?
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. Ryan is an incredibly talented chef who really is mindful of, health and wellness. So it's not that he doesn't use butter and delicious fat, but there is an incredible amount of intention and attention to, the food that he puts together. So, as long as, he's doing it and he's nourishing kind of mind, body, and soul through food, that is absolutely their purpose.
Yeah. So love that. And I think when quarantine hit and we started seeing the impact, I think the restaurant workers in the restaurants, just so heartbreaking to see what is happening in that community. So just what a blessing that you guys are there to provide that level of support, and you've been there for a number of years. So let's talk a little bit more about Giving Kitchen and kind of the overall mission of the nonprofit and how exactly you deliver that mission to restaurant workers in need.
Yeah, so Giving Kitchen is a nonprofit started here in Metro Atlanta, serving the entire state of Georgia, offering financial assistance and a network of community resources to all food service workers who are impacted by a crisis, including an injury, an illness, the death of a family member, an immediate family member, or a housing disaster like a flood or fire. Giving Kitchen can be there to support them through financial assistance. And like I said, community resources. Financial assistance, we cover rent or mortgage, basic living expenses, and utilities. When someone is out of work for some time, making sure that they've got a roof over the head and can get back onto their feet. And then those community resources are a really valuable tool and help for us and for our community, because they are a connection to service providers at either low cost or sliding scale services. And we are able to kind of connect those food service workers to mental health providers or other physicians or dental care or housing and food stability, resources like that. Even for anyone in the food service industry who qualifies for a financial assistance program or not. It's actually become one of our larger, more kind of fast growing programs, just due to the amount of people who come to us and look to us as, again, that beacon of hope and resource that we're able to provide them in the right direction.
Yeah. So I'm imagining you've been crushed with applications for aid.
Yes, we have. My goodness, that's almost an insane understatement. And we've gotten to the point where, and thank goodness, for systems and really great leadership, which is a really important thing to note, I think, during this time for anyone. We, in the first 5 days since COVID-19 impacted Georgia specifically, first 5 days, we saw more inquiries for assistance than we did in those first 5 days than we did throughout the entire year of 2018. The entire year. And for a 12-person staff, you can imagine, obviously, the overtime put in and in the systems that we had in place, that a little bit of tweaking here and there, but to be able to kind of take those people in and give them an opportunity to find some help and stability through our resources was really amazing. We were seeing, so that's 20 times the normal amount of inquiries coming to us, and 4 times the amount of eligible individuals that we're actually able to help. That's what we're seeing on a weekly basis at this point, is 4 times the amount of eligible food service workers coming to us who are needing financial help.
So you obviously are seeking donations, specifically to help get you through this time of quarantine and COVID until people can kind of get back on their feet. I guess that's your number one call.
I would say we have 2 calls. Donations are incredibly important. The thing that I like to remind everybody is, we likely, we all have our favorite bartenders and our servers and our chefs and those dishwashers and anybody within that food service, world that we love. We go out to eat all the time. Going out to eat is about community. It's about gathering. We're there for celebration. We're there for just that engagement. And, these are people who are suffering greatly right now, and even more so than they may have in the past. But what happens today when this server, bartender, chef is affected by a crisis, whether that is COVID-19 related or not, we see so many, illness, injuries, funerals happen on a daily basis. And these individuals are in more crisis today because of COVID-19, but what happens to them when something else happens down the road, and that chef who was sick is in a car accident in 6 months and breaks a leg and is out of work for 12 weeks, or, that server who, broke her wrist and is out of work for 6 weeks, but she has a child, and what happens when that child is sick next year, or if that child becomes sick next year. I mean, we're looking at clients coming to Giving Kitchen who quite literally have children in the NICU who don't make it. There are often times that we pay for funeral expenses because a parent is having to bury a child. These are real life, circumstances. And so the reality is that the Giving Kitchen, because we support such a big community of people, when you look at the entire state of Georgia, we're looking at just shy of 500,000 food service workers spanning the state. And the resources that Giving Kitchen is able to provide through that financial assistance and that resource program, it means that we're vital. We're vital for these food service workers to be here today and in the future. So raising money right now, of course, and fundraising is of vital importance to our stability, to make sure that we are here to support them today, tomorrow, and in the future. But the other thing that we talk about all the time is, Giving Kitchen has just started in the last couple of years of that expansion process. So when Giving Kitchen first formed, we were a nonprofit just catering to a full service restaurant, group. So if you worked in a full service restaurant and you came to us, we could help you. Now, in the last few years, we've been able to expand our offerings to cover all food service workers. So whether or not you are in a full service restaurant,
Georgia.
you work in catering, you work in a concession, or even have a food truck, we're available to be a resource for you. And then, of course, as we expanded to cover the entire state a couple of years ago, so we always say, sharing our story is of equal importance, because it is. Education is always going to be of a high priority for us, as well as raising money, because they go hand in hand. So sharing our story and our mission is just as important as the dollars that we can raise today.
Yeah, and I think we will get through this. We will get through this COVID thing, and life will return to normal, and people will be back in restaurants. And I think that's one of the things I miss the most, is just being able, to go to a restaurant and have a nice meal. And food is love.
Yeah,
it is my love language for sure. And I really miss that. And community. I love the fact that you guys are, it's a community that exists. Mm-hmm. For sure, within the restaurant community. And to see, you've had some high profile donors in Atlanta step up to support the Giving Kitchen, and recognizing the importance of that industry to our quality of life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We've been really lucky to have, again, I think some really great clarity and purpose within our organization. And that's proven by leadership. And making sure that we are offering the resources that we know that we can offer. We understand very clearly what the Giving Kitchen can do and what we cannot do. And we had to really recalibrate and make sure that we understood that and reminded ourselves of that, right when COVID-19 impacted Georgia specifically, because there were an inundation of people coming to us saying, I need help. I'm now unemployed or underemployed. And the thing that we had to remember, because again, we're in an organization, and in nonprofit, you're there for service. I mean, so your heart is gigantic, and you want to offer help to everybody. The reality is that we couldn't, and we realize that with clarity and purpose, and understanding the fact that if there's 500,000 food service workers in our state of Georgia, and we as an organization, if we were to pay 1 month's of rent for all $500,000, we physically do not have the funding or the capacity to do that, and we would fail miserably. Sure. Realizing that, having our clarity and our purpose with what we do, standing firm on our mission, and just making sure that we tell a really clear and concise story. And it's one backed by compassion and care, which is what we always talk about. Then there's no reason that we can't fulfill our duty in the best way possible and help even more people. And again, with the numbers that we're seeing on a consistent basis, we're still in the fight for all food service workers, but I think we're doing a pretty good job organizationally.
That's amazing. And so we both know the way this works is somebody gets a hand up, and then they in turn are able to pay it back. So I think it's going to be fun to watch the unleashing of generosity that unfolds after this, because of organizations like you. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that is really your story, because in your time of need, you had people reach in and lift you up. Mm-hmm. And look at what you're doing now, Jen. It's just really so amazing.
Oh, you're sweet to say that. I will say, absolutely, we talk about community a lot. It is absolutely a team effort. Nothing can be done with just, the weight of everything on one person. And the pay it forward mentality is so true. One of my favorite things to see is the clients that come to Giving Kitchen for help. A lot of times in turn volunteer for other events throughout the year. So it's pretty special to see that exact same pay it forward mentality. They come to us, we provide some help, and in turn they pay it forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I understand you guys won a little award too recently.
That little award is probably one of my most that's amazing. So we were really blessed and honored with receiving the Humanitarian of the Year award by the James Beard Foundation for Giving Kitchen. Yeah, really spectacular. I think for an organization of our size, it was, I think, the first time the James Beard Award had recognized that type of a kind of a service and nonprofit for Humanitarian of the Year, but it was really spectacular. So that definitely set a stage and a precedent for us from a national perspective, for sure.
Okay. Well, I love this part of your story. You found love again, remarried,
Yes.
and there is a new addition to the family. If you could please share more about that.
Yes, I would love to. So, you know, when Ryan passed away, he and I had an immense amount of time to talk about what my future might be like. And I felt really blessed and lucky to have my late husband kind of wish for that for me, you know, really want me to kind of be as powerful as I wanted to be after he passed, find love, have a family, and really kind of, you know, move forward was the thing, not move on, but really move forward in positive light. And I say all the time to people, you know, I feel that Ryan gave me a really great responsibility to fulfill that. And I feel like I've been able to do that for myself as well. That it took me a while to learn that this was a lot for me. But I did get remarried. I actually got remarried in October of 2017 to my husband, John Wayne. And we just welcomed our newborn son named Blue on February 1st of this year. So he's 10 weeks old now, and actually he's 11 weeks old today. But cooing and laughing and totally bringing us immense joy and snuggles all the time. It's pretty awesome.
Well, that is just so amazing, and congratulations. And there's hope. You know, sometimes you can't see it when you're in the middle of unbelievable grief, but your story is just such a beautiful example of just keep going, keep doing, you know, one day at a time, doing the next best thing. And what an example you have set. So one last question for you. So the word relevate means to uplift or inspire. In closing, what words of inspiration do you have for people who may be going through a tough time now and may just need to hear a little word of encouragement?
I have my favorite quote is by one of the strongest fighters I've ever known, my late husband, Ryan Hidinger, and they are, anything long lasting or worthwhile takes time and complete surrender.
Yes, it does. Amen to that, sister. Thank you so much for your time, and can't believe we didn't hear the baby cooing or crying in the background.
He takes really good naps.
Another blessing indeed. Well, and if people would like to donate or support or learn more about the Giving Kitchen, how can they get in touch with you?
Please come and see us over at our website. We actually have a website and an app. So you can find the Giving Kitchen app on iOS or Android, and come and visit us at thegivingkitchen.org.
Okay. I'm going to come see you when this is all over so I can hug you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye, Jen.